Former prisoners of Reddit, what was the most fricked up thing about the prison jail in general you have witnessed? My first night in the prison, I had to sleep head to toe with another guy on the top bunk because there was only 8 beds and I was the 9th guy in the cell. Group shower beatings. I got fricked right up once. Lots of guys like to gang up on one guy. Then the herd changes people every couple weeks, so someone else gets beat up if they don't fit. Do they just pick people at random? Not random. Anyone who does not fit in or who says something that makes someone paranoid. It is sad, really. They were more scared of me for thinking I was an informant than I was of them, LOL. Not me, but one of my best friends saw a guy get jumped and they poured boiling sugar water on his face. My kitchen manager I have worked with for 8 years was locked up for 13 years. He said the worst thing he saw was when an inmate had beef with another, so he decided to heat up a bunch of baby oil in the microwave for a very long time and then threw it on him while he was eating lunch. He said the screams were unimaginable. They took away the microwave due to the incident, and then the oil dumper got jumped by several inmates mad about not having a microwave. He said he never saw him again after that. Technically not my prison story, but my boyfriend has one for you. They had these isolation cells on one side of our dorm with that whole wall facing inward made of the reinforced bulletproof plexiglass so you could see inside, but there was one that had been painted so it was completely blacked out except for one tiny peephole about the size of a nickel where the paint was scratched off. The inmate in that cell had purposely backed up his toilet so his cell flooded with sewage, which was a regular thing with him. He would do this at least twice a week. He had take all the shit coming out of the toilet and covered every single inch of his cell with it, smeared it on the walls as high as he could reach, then he had slain it onto the parts he could not. When the guards would bring him out for 10-15 minutes so the cell could be hosed down, he was always completely naked and covered in shit, hands cuffed, ankles chained with the leg irons, crawling on hands and knees the whole way, no less than 3 armed guards on every side. He used to be a preacher, then went off the deep end so the state committed him to the mental ward for a long time. Right after he was released from the ward at the state hospital, he decapitated a preacher one night after stabbing him to death inside a funeral home he had broken into. The first time I looked through the peephole when I found out it was him, he was sitting in the middle of the floor hunched over his Bible between his legs on the floor, just rocking. His cell had been stripped of literally everything, because at some point he had used everything to either clog up the toilet or hurt himself or someone else. All that was in this blacked out cell was the toilet, the bare bunk attached to the wall, the Bible, and this naked man. No pillow, no blanket, no radio, no toilet paper, nothing, not even the 2 inches scratchy ass mattress pad we all slept on. Edited to add my jail story that I totally forgot about because I usually pretend to have never been to jail. Jails around here stay over capacity, so being female, I could not be placed in the holding cell with everybody else coming in. I stayed chained up in booking most of the time, and there was a supervising CO behind the desk bitching non-stop because he could not find his iPhone charger and no one else on shift had an iPhone. I mean, over the course of like 6 hours, he poked around the desk and complained about the charger, only taking a break from that so he could crack jokes about me coming in with a cattle prod and a couple of sheathed 8-inch hunting knives lugged into my property bag. When this guy had 15 minutes left on duty before getting off work and going home to charge his goddamn iPhone, he picked out an inmate's name from a sheet of paper, commented that he did not really like this guy anyway, then got on his radio and had that inmate taken to the hole for 24 hours. He put a guy in the hole for 24 hours for no reason apart from being frustrated he could not charge his phone. Former CO here had a guy on suicide watch eat a golf pencil, then proceeded to eat his colostomy bag, had to go in and wrestle with him covered in feces while he was choking on the colostomy bag clip. Good times. It was a brand new jail, but it was built on a swamp. A year into operation the building started to settle and the sliding doors did not shut, so we were not really locked into our pod, and our county spent about $10 million to build it. Worked in a prison. Watched a guy in the dry cell, no sink or toilet, eat the drug bag condom he shit out twice. He was in there so they could wait him out, and he would just let his BM build, until he just had to shit and then blast it out and swallow it before the cows could get in there. After the second time he went to the infirmary, was that most disgusting display of passive resistance I have ever seen. When my uncle came up for parole in prison in Australia in the 80s, the guards deliberately shut him in the exercise yard with a pedophile. The pedo posed no threat to my uncle, but the rest of the prison was watching. If my uncle bashed the pedo, his parole would be delayed. If he did not bash the pedo, the rest of the blokes in the prison would have beaten my uncle severely. He beat up the pedophile and stayed a few more months. Fricking dog act by the guards. Came to see a friend in prison in the Philippines. It is a neighborhood-style prison and no one is inside a cell, just makeshift homes so they have a place to sleep. Their prison has a store that sells snacks, drinks, cigarettes, and liquor. We had a few shots inside and the police are totally okay with it. One time, I asked an inmate to get me a smoke. I was wondering how I was gonna light it because the guards confiscated my lighter going inside. To my surprise, the inmate arrived with my cigarette and it is already lighted, ready to use with the filter still wet from his lips. Oh, and the prices of the items there are 8x the regular price. I was in a mental health unit. The most ducked up thing I saw was some inmates in my unit starving themselves because they were addicts and they would sell their food trays for a scoop or two of instant coffee. The only way they would eat is during feeding time since they had already sold their trays. They would go around to all inmates with their broken bowl. It was broken because if they had a functioning bowl, it was sold for coffee, begging for things other inmates did not like, usually green beans or vegetables. If they got a lot of something they deemed had value, they did do their best to sell it for a half a spoon of coffee. It was just really sad to watch. Two dudes holding hands while taking shits. Wholesome, bowelsome. Seen a 21-year-old guy come in with lots of facial bruising and a duck eye. He was hit with a hot pot before being transferred to my pod. Former CO here, 6 days on the job and an offender beat his cellmate to death with a fan motor, bashed his skull in BC. He found out his crime was child rape. Offender was dead for 4 hours and the other offender tied a string to his hand, using it as a puppet when we made our rounds, indicating he was alive. Offender got tired of having a dead body in his cell, told my friend he was dead and to get him out of there. Officer didn't believe him. BC offenders joked a lot just like that with us, until he yanked the body off the bed and brain matter was slung across the cell and his head bounced from the force of the throw. My friend was 18 years old at the time. He still has nightmares and explained he can't ever forget the sound of his head hitting the ground. A guy cut the tendons on the back of the knees on the person in the bunk below me at night, and I didn't realize he'd been lying under the bunk. Head count at lights out was like the rest of the place corrupt. Not me but a friend. The long-term trustworthy prisoners worked in the kitchen. One put his very old tennis shoe in the vat of custard and other inmates ate it unaware of what happened. He didn't eat custard for the rest of his stay after that. Segregation. I went in Gen Pop ignorant and just tried to grab a bunk when a white guy with some overtly racist tattoos stopped me and warned me away from the bunk area. It was because I am white and the area was black. It was just shocking. I was in a random kinda small jail one time. It did not really have any race stuff going on. Then this old white supremacist con turned up. I was in the rec room playing basketball with some black guys and the con was walking around in circles around the outside, and then he walked behind me and he said kind of quietly, "Are you a N-word?" One of the black guys heard him, so that got kind of tense. We got kicked out back to the pod. The con was looking at me, so I went and sat down at a table with the same black guys and men. The stare from the con, you would have thought I did murdered his puppy. He ended up getting moved before we had to fight about this stupid ducking shit, so that was nice. This is where you end up from years of prison. Kids. During round saw inmate with a bloody nose, with both hands covering his face. He told us it wasn't that bad. The entire lower half of his face was covered with blood as well as most of his chest. Took us a few minutes to convince him to move his hand so we could see his face. Turns out he had took a single blade from a razor and cut his own nose off. When he removed his hands, all that was there was 2 gaping holes and a bone that separated them. Worse than sugar water is a product that we could order from the canteen called Magic Shave. It is basically Nair for men. You microwave it and pour on someone's face. I never saw it done, but I saw people that had it done to them. I was in a military prison. I watched a fight break out between a non-violent inmate in for theft and a pedo in for child porn, which was somewhat common. Then found out it was because the pedophile stole pictures of the other inmate's family. After that got out, the guards accidentally left them alone together in the common area for isolation. Something about the isolation, the doors all being buzzed open. Guy just walk out of his cell and into the other cell for round 2. Side story, since I have seen it mentioned here already. Yes, people did play D&D in jail. Some of us even had printed out PDFs of the rules books and monster manuals. As long as we kept the printed books in the manila envelopes when not used, they counted as correspondence. There were no dice though. You could use dice with the provided board games like Monopoly or Risk, but not outside those games. So we kept piles of cards laid out. Diamonds Ace 10 was 110, Hearts Ace 10 was 1120. That was out D20. We did the other dice similarly. Hand-drawn character sheets and theater of the mind. Technically it was not allowed because one player being the DM would put you in a position of power over others, but we never ducked with anyone, so they let it slide or just did not look into it further. Not a prisoner. My husband is a CO and one of the inmates wanted to show him something he thought he might need to call medical about, so he walked over and what he wanted to show him was his dick. Implant. A couple guys shaved down pieces of dominoes into really smooth shards and then cut a slit in the skin on the top side of their penises like halfway down the length and slid it in there to lay underneath the skin. When my husband was like, WTF is that and why are you showing that to me, he explained what he did and said he was worried it was infected. No shit, Sherlock. When asked why the heck they would do that, they said it is so it will rub against the clitoris of their future partners while they are having sex after release. Which, now that I am really thinking about it, does not match up based on his description of the positioning, but okay. I asked him what it looked like and he said it looked like a weird giant vein trying to bust out of his penis. People do weird shit. Edit just asked him whatever happened with the guy and he said the guy cut the skin back open and pulled it out because he could not take the irritation, but the infection got worse anyway, so they sent him to the hospital to get fixed and get more antibiotics and whatnot. I was in a female prison. This is not really ducked up, more a general impression, but the second they know you are new and they know you are new by your shoes, they will swarm you for your nicotine patch, try to stand over you for things like sugar and coffee, and will try to get you to be their girlfriend. Having a partner on the outside is not considered a good enough excuse to deny them. Often the girls that are more susceptible to being taken advantage of will end up being in a relationship with someone hoping that person will then protect them from the rest of the girls in the block. Consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video and if you want to see more of Reddit Universe.